First of all, thank you all for coming. And a special thank you to Beit Uri Tzvi, the Uri Tzvi Greenberg Museum, for hosting and also for continuing the legacy of the Prophet Uri Tzvi and helping us to continue to march on in his path. In the last decade or so that I've been involved in peace work, I've come to the conclusion that there's really three major obstacles to being able to achieve peace and justice for the peoples of this land. The first is, and these are obstacles between us, I don't mean even structural, I want to talk psychological, because psychological I think is where a lot of it begins. Number one, the two-state solution. Any discussion of a two-state solution, in my opinion, just prevents us from being able to move forward with something that could work. Number two, the combination of Israel's ruling class wanting to be part of the West and not the Middle East, combined with the insistence of Palestinians and our neighbors in the region insisting on seeing us as part of the West and not the Middle East, as a colonial presence. And the third, which is really what we hope to address tonight, is the fact that so many people, so many Palestinians and so many Israelis are so deeply afraid of the other's story, of the other's identity, of the other's narrative. And when I say narrative, I just want to be very clear. When I say narrative, I'm talking about a collection of facts that are selectively chosen and contextualized within an ideological worldview. Meaning when it comes to the last 100 years of our experiences in this land, there are millions of facts. And we all tend to select and organize the facts we like, the facts that suit our agendas, the facts that suit our ideologies, the facts that make sense to us, and we often discard the facts that don't. And we've gotten to the point where so many of us, so many Jews and so many Palestinians, feel that if we legitimize the narrative of the other, the identity of the other, the story of the other, we ultimately invalidate our own stories, invalidate our own identities, invalidate our own narratives. And I think ultimately the only way to really march forward is to be able to create a larger narrative that's inclusive enough to encompass both ostensibly rival narratives. That instead of being the antagonists in each other's stories, instead of being the enemies in each other's stories, we can be co-protagonists together. But at this point, it really feels that that this barrier, the purpose of an event like this is to allow us to understand the story of the other. And it's not just if you want to make peace. Let's say somebody here doesn't want to make peace. Somebody's decided, I don't want to make peace, I want to win. I want to beat the other. Even if that's your objective, even if you just want to beat the other, you still have an incentive to understand his story as he experiences it, instead of just fighting your fantasy antagonist of who the other is. And there's so many examples, I think, in this conflict of ways that both peoples behave that are not based on fighting the other according to how the other understands himself, but rather fighting the other according to our fantasy of who the other is. I'm just going to give one example because we don't have time to give more than one. But it exists in both directions. Most Israelis experience this conflict as a conflict between competing nationalisms. Whereas in my experience, most Palestinians I've spoken to and worked with experience this as an anti-colonial struggle. And the way anti-colonial tactics work is you make the price of occupation more expensive than the benefits of exploitation. And if you can make the price of occupation more expensive than the benefits of exploitation, the occupier will leave. That's how the Algerians beat the French. That's how we beat the British. Right? We made the price of occupation more expensive than the benefits of exploitation. The British left. And that's how many Palestinian groups try to fight Israel. And based on the experience Palestinians have and the way in which the role Israel plays in their story, that makes sense. If Israel is being experienced as a settler colony, if Zionism is being experienced as a colonial movement. The problem is the vast majority of Israelis self-identify as an indigenous people. And if you try to use anti-colonial methods of struggle against a population that self-identifies as native, has superior firepower and feels threatened, the results will be radically different from what's expected. And this is happening in both directions. I just wanted to share one small example to articulate, to really like illustrate what I'm talking about. But tonight is really all about trying to break through that wall and hearing each other's stories, being able to engage the narrative of the other without feeling our own narratives threatened. And with that, I'd really like to invite our panelists, the panelists for the English panel, to come and take seats next to Yishai.
Good evening, my name is Yoav Peck. I'm a Jerusalem resident. I've been an Israeli for the last 47 years, and I came as a tourist in 1972 and fell in love with the place and the people especially, and couldn't think of a reason to go back to California. I am the co-director of the Sulha Peace Project. My co-director, Palestinian co-director, is back there, Iyad Abu Shama. And we work together. The Sulha has been functioning for the last 20 years, bringing Palestinians and Israelis together for people-to-people solidarity building. Basically, we believe that things happen from the top down and from the bottom up. From the top down, the political circus is not our focus, and we believe that any future solution will require cooperation between Israelis and Palestinians around water, around electricity, around security, around education, around culture. We will need to cooperate no matter what solution is finally worked out. And yet, Palestinians and Israelis don't know each other. Most Palestinians have never had a normal conversation with an Israeli if he wasn't a settler or a soldier at a roadblock. And most Israelis have not had a conversation with a Palestinian. So our job at Sulha is to bring people together for people-to-people meetings. We always go for the personal. People have plenty of opportunities to argue politics, but very few opportunities to talk about the real issues that affect their lives. Issues like fear, like trust, like gender issues. And each gathering of a Sulha meeting is focused on one of these issues. We bring people together for about 5 hours, either in Neve Shalom or somewhere in Israel, and then we need permits for the Palestinians, or in the territories, so that Palestinians who can't get permits will be able to come to the events. And the center of the events, the heart of each event, is an hour and a half of what we call listening circles. Not discussion circles, but listening circles. In other words, we use the Native American technique for passing a speaking object so that only the speaker is speaking. And each person has a chance to go into their heart and to speak from their heart about their lives, the issues that concern them. At Hanukkah, we talked about darkness and light in our lives. So we're always looking for what will open people to share personally about what happens to them day by day. We also include a meal together and music, sometimes dancing or listening to an inspirational speaker or artist. But the focus is consistently, who are you, who am I, and what we find at the end of each gathering of between 80 and 120 people is that people go home with hope. So that's our job, to generate hope as long as we don't have a resolution of the conflict, and also to demonstrate to people that the other side has much more in common with them than we have differences. So that's what we do at Sulha, and good to be here.
Hello everyone, my name is Mel Cohen. I love Sulha, by the way. I was born in Jerusalem. My father's side, we came from the Armenian genocide. We first moved to Syria, but it seems at the time we were in love with conflict. So we came to Palestine. In 1948, my family was expelled. We were in Jaffa, West Jerusalem, and all of our houses and possessions were taken away. But how do I exist here today? Because my father, unfortunately, came back in the 70s. He was able to settle after 10 years of expulsion, continuous expulsion back and forth. I grew up with a lot of racism and discrimination. I felt like worthless, nobody. I always was ashamed to say I'm a Palestinian. By the way, Armenians are Palestinians as well. Palestinian doesn't mean Arab only or Muslim only. Palestinian is a pluralistic identity. Many people groups are Palestinians who come here and live here. I was shot at in 2001 at the age of 13 as I was going back and forth to my high school in Bethlehem. I never threw one stone, I never did anything. But all I wanted to do is to leave this country. I hated it so bad. But when I left at the age of 22 or so, I had a spiritual experience with a creator. I was an atheist. And he changed my life and changed my heart. And he gave me love for my enemies and forgiveness. And since then, I believed in peace and justice. And I did my master's in human rights and international law. My BA was in psychology. I've been in the humanitarian field for the last 6 years or so. I'm originally 75 years old, but I did plastic surgeries. I don't know. But yeah, so I've been involved in peace activism around the world with the refugees, Palestinians, Syrians, even Armenians, believe it or not. We have many Armenians expelled from Syria with the Syrian crisis. And I've been with marginalized groups in general, children, women, etc. But yeah, that's why I'm here. It's not because even peace is cool to me or attractive to me. I mean, peace needs sacrifice. I would rather live in some country that accepts me as I am. You know, I grew up here, I even couldn't date a girl because I was a Palestinian. So for me to date somebody, if I said I'm a Palestinian, they would spit on me. So I had to deny my identity daily. It was a very hard way. But yeah, today it's different, and that's why I believe the only way is relationship and coexistence. Thank you.
Okay, hi everybody. My name is Yishai Fleisher, and today I serve as the international spokesman for the Jewish community of Hebron. I am a so-called settler. I'm the son of Russian refuseniks, which means people whose Jewish identity was denied and their visas to the land of Israel were denied. They fought for the rights to leave the Soviet Union, and they came here. My parents came in 1972, and with that exodus of Russian Jews from the Soviet Union, and many to the land of Israel, really, they helped undermine and destroy, finally, the Soviet Union. So I'm from a family of folks who are used to fighting for our rights. I'm also a lawyer and a rabbi, and I'm not involved in peace work. I'm involved in respect work. I believe in the word respect more than I do believe in the word peace. I think that we have to respect one another. And I know that in the Middle East, when we give each other respect, when we give respect, we get respect. And that's the formula towards peace. And I think that before we go to peace, which has a ring of love to it, and maybe we're not there yet, we have to first get respect, give respect, get respect, have an atmosphere of respect. I want to also, speaking of respect, I want to say thank you very much to Beit Uri Tzvi, to the Bayit, and to Brit Chazon. This is an awesome gathering, a very important gathering. I want to tell you in the short time that I've allotted, right, Rita? I want to use my time to tell you a very quick story. The quick story goes like this. 2 months ago, I was having a bat mitzvah for my daughter. Mazal tov. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. A 12-year-old girl. Bat mitzvah comes into womanhood. And we were going to have our celebration at Ma'arat HaMachpelah, the tomb of the patriarchs and matriarchs, the Ibrahimi Mosque in Hebron. Okay? And in our family, I told you my parents are Russian. They have a thing that they love. My father, I love Shalom, but my mother also. We love fireworks. We love fireworks. Do you guys love fireworks? Love fireworks. So for any big event, we have fireworks. Now this was the first granddaughter. I'm the oldest. This is the first daughter, the oldest girl of the whole kind of clan. And we're going to have an event at Marat HaMachpelah, the tomb of the patriarchs and matriarchs, tomb of Abraham. And I wanted fireworks. So I turned to, since I live on the Jewish side of town, and I have to deal with the army and all these people, so I turned to a Jewish guy who people told me does fireworks. He wanted a lot of money. He said he's not going to be there, and there's a bureaucracy. How much time? 30. Okay, there's 30 seconds. So there's an army there, and they're not going to let you. And I tried so hard to make it happen, and I was just getting stonewalled, blocked off. It wasn't going to happen. I wasn't going to have fireworks. A week before the bat mitzvah, my mom says in Russian accent, she says, "No, is there going to be fireworks?" And suddenly an idea flashed in my mind. Wait a minute. My Arab friends in Hebron, on the other side, they're great with fireworks. They shoot fireworks all the time, and nobody stops them. So I called my friend and my colleague, finishing off, my friend and my colleague, Ashraf Jabri, Sheikh Ashraf Jabri in Hebron. I said to him, Ashraf, Haj Ashraf, please do me a favor, shoot some fireworks for me at the bat mitzvah. What? I said to him, I want you to shoot fireworks. You want do you want that I should buy you some fireworks? No, man. I want you to shoot them for me from one of the Arab houses right next to Marat HaMachpelah. Finally, he got it. You know what? He asked me just for the money for the fireworks. He said the hafala, the activation of it, is on me. 7 o'clock, we made a deal that he's going to shoot off on this day. Now, I had to make sure that we all understand the times. And we're on touch by phone. And when we came out of Marat HaMachpelah, 15 minutes late, I go, Achshav. He goes, Achshav? I said, Achshav, now. Suddenly, a barrage of fireworks fired over Marat HaMachpelah. The soldiers couldn't care less. They just are like Arab fireworks. And then they were being shot towards our side of Marat HaMachpelah. Nobody cared except for us. It was the most beautiful thing I ever saw in my life. And the secret of that story is that he honored me by shooting fireworks for me. But I honored him because I asked him to be part of my simcha and my joy. And that is just a little bit of respect of the work towards peace that we have in Hebron. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Yehuda from Brit Chazon, from the Vision Movement. And for me, I came here to participate in one of the most exciting and climactic chapters of my people's story. And for people who experience displacement for thousands of years to suddenly come back to life, and for me to have the merit to be born into a generation where I get to participate in that is really beyond words when you take a moment to think of it. And what's important to me, and I think what should be important to many of us, is to try and understand what Jewish liberation really means and what are the goals in this generation. So I went through this process of trying to understand what the goals of Jewish liberation are now and what I would consider to be the post-Zionist era. This is a semantic argument maybe, but I define Zionism as one of many Jewish liberation movements that existed between the 1880s and 1967. I think in 1967, Zionism completed its task, it finished, we came back to Zion, and since then I think Am Yisrael has been in need of a new Jewish liberation ideology that can protect Zionism's positive achievements while cleaning up its mess and correcting its flaws. And so in trying to identify the goals of this generation, of this chapter of Jewish history, I came to the conclusion that one of these goals really is peace with the Palestinians and the broader Middle East, for Israel to become an organic part of the Middle East and not to exist here as an outpost of Western civilization, but really to indigenize into the region. And when I approach peace between Jews and Palestinians, I'm doing so as a goal of Jewish liberation, no different from reviving the Hebrew language, ingathering exiles, or fighting to liberate the land from the British Empire. And when I started getting involved in this peace work, it was called alternative peace work. And the reason why it was called alternative is really for three reasons. Number one, we are not part of what's called the peace industry. We're not one of these NGOs that takes European money. We also don't take money from the Christian right. We, as a rule, don't take money from anyone but Jews and Palestinians, meaning we want that our efforts be driven by those most affected and most involved and with most to gain and lose from how this conflict goes. The second, and by not being part of the peace industry, we obviously have the freedom to reject a two-state solution and to not really care what foreign governments say because we're not taking money from them anyway. The second reason we are considered alternative is because we don't believe that peace could be achieved by bringing the westernized diplomats from Tel Aviv and Ramallah together to sign an American piece of paper. That won't work. The only way to really make peace and move forward, in my opinion, the only way to really move forward and make peace, in my opinion, is to bring together those who are fully living the aspirations of their people. Not the quote-unquote moderates, but actually the quote-unquote extremists, the radicals on both sides, those who've been driving the conflict, and those who would, of course, torpedo any effort to make peace that marginalizes us. And that means I might be doing very similar work to Yoav. In the Sulha organization. It sounds like great work, but I happen to find myself doing it in the West Bank, in Samaria and Judea, with Jews and Palestinians who live in close proximity to one another, so that, of course, relationships can be established and people can move forward together. And but really, those who are fully living their people's aspirations, their people's stories, and not willing to compromise on our stories, but who are able to become co-protagonists in the same story rather than being the antagonists in each other's stories. And the third reason we're considered alternative is because we don't believe that peace can be achieved by forcing either side to compromise on anything that's fundamentally important to us. The only way that we can really achieve peace in this land is with a solution that is experienced as victory by both peoples in both subjective narratives. And that, of course, requires us to unpack the grievances and aspirations of both sides and to try to work towards a solution that will address the grievances, honor the identities, and meet the aspirations of both sides.
Thank you. The way the rest of this panel is going to work is each panelist is going to have a chance to ask another panelist a question, and that selected panelist is going to have 3 minutes to answer that question. We'll then turn to audience questions. We're going to try and stay a little stricter to time just because we're short on time. So we'll start on that side of the table with a question that you have for another.
Explain what you think she means by that question.
Yeah, she's asking me if I stress that I'm different from the other Christians. Armenian is not a religion. You know, some of the Palestinian Christians of us, we think Armenian is a denomination. This is for some who don't know what Palestinian Christians think. When you hear Armenian, my grandmother is Aramaic, by the way, and my mother is Coptic, they think those are denominations. My mother is Coptic, we are the ancient Pharaoh Egyptians. My grandmother is Aramaic, we are actually the ancient people of the land of Canaan, as well as the Jews came after. We are the ancestors of Abraham. Abraham was from Iraq, and Iraq was Aramaic, or Chaldonite. And Armenians, we come from the eldest son of Noah, which is where most European nations descend. But by the way, I didn't stress I'm different. I was saying I'm part of the Palestinian people. I'm saying people assume we're different because I'm Armenian. I'm saying I am a Palestinian and that's my right to call myself a Palestinian. I stressed the opposite. I didn't stress the difference. I stressed the commonality, what is similar, okay?
Yes, and the change is in human consciousness. We do not pretend to be forging a political solution to the conflict. As I said in my comments before, we focus on the people-to-people level, and what happens is that when people feel safe enough to share themselves and to listen carefully to other people sharing themselves, miracles happen. Miracles like one of our board members is a Palestinian whose intention when he came to Palestine from Jordan was to kill Jews. And somehow, before he managed to carry out his plan, he was invited to one of our gatherings, and he was in shock. because Israelis had been demonized in his experience so severely that he couldn't imagine that there were Israelis who wanted to hear his story, who wanted to speak with him, who wanted to share with him, and as I say, he's now a member of our board. So people really turn around when they discover the other side. You know, one of the hardest things for Israelis is to actually see that when Palestinians are free and safe, that will be the beginning of our own freedom and our own safety. And it's so hard to put yourself in the other person's place. During the 2014 war, we sat at Neve Shalom, Palestinians and Israelis together, and the Palestinians listened to the worries of Israeli mothers whose children were fighting with the IDF in Gaza, and the Israelis listened to Palestinians whose extended families were being bombarded by Israelis. And there was listening. There was not fighting, there was not arguing. So it makes a difference, and people need hope. And when they leave our gatherings, they leave with hope, which fuels their ongoing, their ability to carry on in this situation which is still undecided. You say you're not a peace worker, you're a respect worker. And as a resident of the Jewish community in Hebron, I find it really difficult to understand how respect and the Jewish presence in Hebron go together. The army, the oppression of the Palestinian population in Hebron since 1967, the extreme limitation of human rights in Hebron, the reality of life for a Hebron Palestinian. How can you put that in the same sentence with, I'm a respect worker?
3 minutes to respond.
Great, thanks for an excellent question, a fair question, I think. First thing, respect has to be about our, as Yehuda talked about, we also have a narrative, and Hebron is a deep, deep part of our narrative. Our fathers and mothers are buried there. We're from there. We've lived there for 3,500 years straight until we were ethnically cleansed in 1929 by the British, who were in cahoots with jihadist elements, and we're getting our rights back. So how could you have any respect if you don't respect our story as well? Meaning to say, sure, we could leave and all just pack up the bags and move to Brooklyn, but that wouldn't be and there might be peace, but there wouldn't be any respect. So that's issue number one. Issue number two is that we, the Jewish so-called settlers, are not the ones that put up these walls. We were against the Oslo process. We are against the Palestinian authorities' corrupt and very oppressive regime, bully regime that they have there. And we're not for this tremendous army that we have all around us in order to protect us. It happens to be that there is a security situation, you can't deny that. But the walls and the closures of stores, that is not something that we want. We want a lively town. We want to be part of a Hebron that's live. Sometimes I say to people, there's no big city next to the Jewish community of Hebron except for Hebron, right? We have a very vivacious city, Hebron, 5 billion shekels worth of exports to regular Israel. We want to be part of that. We want to be part of that. Recently we had to buy mattresses from the Herbawi company in Arab Hebron. We couldn't meet next to one another. We had to drive trucks so that we could meet far away because we have no way of shaking hands across a wall that's not ours to build. But I really do feel that the Jewish presence of Hebron is the beginning of respect. And in fact, with Yinon and with the Bayit, we are planning a joint cleanup session next to the tomb of Abraham, let's call it, of Arabs and Jews together. We have monthly meetings with our Arab neighbors. Some of our Arab neighbors are not friendly to us and are against our story and our narrative altogether. And there are others who are respectful, want to see Israeli sovereignty there. And I think that Hebron is specifically the place where we could start, not in Neve Shalom, with respect. The real place that we have to start coming together is in that place where the children of Abraham come together, and that is Hebron.
Okay, my turn to ask the same person, why not? What is your understanding of suffering, and how do you respond to someone who's suffering?
You want to make it more specific, maybe? Because if somebody here is sick, I wish them health. What do you mean suffering? What are you talking about? Are you talking about, next week we're remembering the Holocaust, 75 years since Auschwitz. What are you referring to?
Suffering as in somebody being hurt, being attacked.
Somebody or specifically?
No, you can speak generally. I mean, there's no time for the specifics. It would go for 2 hours of discussion. But you can speak generally, and it depends on whatever you want. Like somebody who's, let's say, Jewish people back in any European country who were suffering. What's your concept of suffering? What would you expect from somebody who's not Jewish? How would you like him to interfere to sympathize, or to maybe not sympathize with the suffering of the certain Jewish people who were suffering at some point?
Okay, I have to admit that is not a question that I was, had the answer in my pocket. Not something, not a way of saying it that I, have a prepared answer for. And so I'm going to give you maybe a different kind of answer than I even expected to say, which is, as Jewish people, in many ways, we are people who know suffering and have been through a lot of suffering. And one of the ways that we've come into this era is with the idea of self-determination, and that nobody's really going to protect us. And maybe that's a way to understand the Jews of Hebron a little bit better. They really don't think that America's going to help them, or England's going to help them. And they don't think that Israel's necessarily going to help them, or the army, or the police, or especially the Shabak, or the what are they called? The civil administration. Like, in many ways, we fight them. And in many ways, I think that what my Arab friends in the Arab side of Hebron don't know is we feel that we're suffering a lot there. Not just from Arabs, but from, I can't build a house because my own government stops me from doing that. My own government is ambivalent. So I see suffering on the other side. It's never pretty. It's never nice. I don't like to see Arabs being stopped and checked. And I'll tell you, how much time do I have? 30 seconds? A minute, great. I have a story that happened today, just before I came into the building. My friend Majdi. Where are you, Majdi? Where are you there? There. My friend Majdi, I spoke to him, and I said, how are you doing? How's it? How did you get here? Anyway, we're talking about a lot of stuff. He told me that recently he was on a bus, and that he was on an Israeli bus, a Jewish bus. And a guy comes up to him with a gun, a non-soldier, and says to him, who are you? What are you doing? Show me your ID. And he said to him, you have a problem, call the police. You're not a police officer. And he said to me, I was very embarrassed. Everybody's looking. Everybody in the bus is afraid. Maybe there's a terrorist. There's an altercation. Everybody's looking at the guy. And he was embarrassed, and he was ashamed. I think there was suffering there. And he told me that he said to the guy, look, if you have a problem, call the police. There's no problem here, but if you have a problem, call the police. I said to Majdi, I said, listen, next time, just for a second, say to him, hey, I really appreciate that you're security concerned. I'm also security concerned. But I just want you to know, I'm not a problem. You can call the police, we can do this formally, but I just want you to know, you got the wrong guy here. With respect, because I know you're nervous. And so, I think that Majdi felt pain, I think this guy was afraid, and I think a little bit more conversation could ease it. And now I have a question, I have the mic, and it's my turn to ask a question. It's actually back to you, my friend, Mel Cohen. I have a question for you. You said Palestinianism, Palestinian identity, well, I didn't want to use the word twice because it's a pluralistic identity. Did you say that? How did you say it? Can you say it again for me?
Pluralistic.
Good. Nailed it. I want to ask you this. Can Israeli...
I didn't know, it's a dictation.
No. It's not, and I'm not tricking you. I really want to know, truly, can Israeli, for you, be a pluralistic identity? Can you be an Israeli Armenian, or an Israeli Palestinian, or an Israeli Arab, or an Israeli Christian, or maybe an Israeli Muslim for other parts of the table? Can you accept at any point in your life, and you've gone through a lot of changes, the Israeli identity is a pluralistic identity?
So the question of can, can a monkey turn into an elephant? Maybe yes, maybe no. But I'm saying can is a different answer or question from reality. So can an Israeli identity be pluralistic or inclusive? Maybe yes. If Israel chooses to do so, hallelujah.
Can you accept it?
According to Eno. Can I accept? Of course, if Israel does it, why not? Amazing. I would love Israel to include everybody, but without excluding my Palestinian identity, okay? So I have Palestinian friends who say, I'm Israeli Palestinian. That's beautiful. Actually, it's a beautiful, I'm not Israeli Palestinian. I don't have citizenship nor nationality, to say the least. But I use Palestinian as a metaphor also, not only as a nationality. I use it in a very deeper sense because I represent people group whom I love so dearly and I'm honored to be part of, defending and speaking of their suffering, representing their victimhood and their oppression. Now, they are being oppressed. Now, so can it be? Yes, in theory, everything can become amazing. Is it in reality? Of course not. Actually, Palestinian identity is inclusive, or has been historically way more inclusive than today, by the way. But today's Israeli identity is one of the most exclusive identities because it wants even any non-Jew may suffer within Israel today. The Druze, the Ethiopian, like any even Jews who are of different countries and backgrounds, So it's definitely excluding rather than including. But why not? I hope let's turn it into inclusivity. That's our dream here, and that's what we're doing.
Yeah, switch it up. I like this mic better. The truth is, after sitting here and listening to everybody else's introductions and questions, I have no idea who I want to ask a question to. Is there anyone who'd like to ask me a question, or would like me to ask them a question? No, I don't know. Like, I don't know.
Yourself.
No, I have no specific question for anyone. I'd like to maybe only Yoav, because you of your question to Yishai, maybe I'll ask you if is well, maybe I'll ask it to everyone other than Yishai.
And I'm not feeling included here.
No.
I'm feeling excluded. Okay.
I guess, when we speak about a Jewish presence in Hebron, or theoretically a Jewish presence in Jericho, because maybe I'd like to live in Jericho one day, or Bethlehem, or Shechem, Nablus. Is that something that any of you feel inherently threatened by, so long if it's just Jews living there? Or is it the structures? Meaning, can we create a situation in your minds where Jews are able to live in the West Bank, in Judea and Samaria, without being settlers? Is there a way for a Jew to be able to exercise his right to return to his homeland, specifically the cradle of Jewish civilization, the places that we've been yearning to return to for thousands of years, without living according to the structures of settler colonialism, and without being regarded, without being seen as aliens, without being seen as foreigners? Can we achieve that? And maybe just yes or no answers is okay. We could pass the mic.
Does anyone specifically want to take the question?
Yeah, whoever, any or all of you.
We can do everyone at 1 minute, or one person takes it.
1 minute to all.
I'll do a quickie. Without justice, it won't work. People talk about history and about the historic rights of Jews to be in this land, etc. That doesn't interest me. What interests me is what's going to work. What's going to get my grandchildren into a situation when they reach the age of 18, they don't have to serve in an army, because we have worked it out with the Palestinians. Now, there are lots of creative solutions going around, and some of them include Israelis being able to live in Palestine as the French people live in England, that they would have citizenship in Israel, and they would be living in a foreign country named Palestine. So that works for me, as long as there's justice and respect that accompanies it.
Can one of the Palestinians answer?
Yeah, we'll go 1 minute. We're now going to turn to audience questions. If you have a question, you can raise your hand. I'll call on you. And if you can come up to the front and ask the question here. Yes.
Make it hard.
The answers
that's
are
right.
2 minutes.
Yeah.
2 minutes.
I like that.
It's getting harder and harder.
Hi, Joel Kaplan, American Israeli, made Aliyah 3 years ago, so I come with guilt about entering a foreign land where I can't speak the language.
That's why this panel's in English. It's all good.
So I have a neuroscience question. As we learn more about the mind and different levels of the mind, like the amygdala, where the instinct comes out, and the higher levels of processing, higher levels of the cortex, where we move more into universality, what role can globalism and our understanding of both our indigenous religion, but also other religions, Hindu, Sikh, Native American, Buddhism, help us to evolve into our human identity, to transcend our amygdala consciousness? And what role would ritual on a daily basis to restore that push towards our higher consciousness as opposed to our fighting consciousness, and how can we bring that to the next generation?
What is that question for?
I think if I may, I think I feel your, I feel it. I feel what you're saying, and I want to answer you, if I may. Remind me your name again? Joel?
Joel, yeah, but can we all just take a deep breath together?
Did you feel that higher consciousness? Everybody get past the lizard brain and into a joint consciousness. Joel, I want to say something to you. I appreciate the question. I don't think that humanity is going to prosper when we eliminate our differences completely. We learned that in our Torah about the 12 tribes. That there's 12 different tribes, they have different characteristics, they have different families. And those families are tribes. Those tribes are clannish. But there's something very beautiful about that. It's a mosaic that everybody gets to keep their color, their coloration, their family unity. And I think that we see that in Arab society, Armenian society, Jewish society, world society. People have their houses and their family. They have a little unit, and it becomes a bigger unit. There's a nation, it comes together. Nations live on their land. I'm still a fan of the idea that nationalism is liberalism. I'm still a fan of the idea that the family of nations can come together by peoples living in their indigenous land, with their indigenous language and their indigenous calendar. I still believe in that. I still think that that's actually the ultimate liberalism. I think that I don't know which one is which. There's globalism, and there's there's globalism, and then there's global trade, which is globalization. Thank you. There's globalism and globalization. Which one is which, I don't know. But one of them means the erasure of borders and lines and languages and currencies. And there's another one which says, no, you get to keep your borders, languages, currencies, and calendars. But you get to work with the world. You get to see those other things. You get to trade. You get to read their stuff. Today I was in a museum in Jerusalem that had only German writing. I took out my brand new phone here, hit Google Translate on the photo thing, and I was able to read it in English because it was able to translate immediately. And I was like, that's my ability to connect to this German stuff. But I don't want it all erased into one global language, one global family. I want to keep those other. So I don't want to, in the brand new consciousness that you're speaking of, I wouldn't erase differences. That's what I want to say.
Thank you. Next question. Yes.
Was it for only yourself?
We're going to do one answer per
I stole it. That's not fair.
We'll
Whatever.
lay out the answers.
Hi, I've got a question, and I don't mind who answers it. Maybe these people do in the end. When I was sitting here, I was so really glad when Yoav spoke, and he said that when they use this circle with a talking stick, It's not about politics. It's just that everyone has to be quiet while someone speaks about their own experience and listen and realise that there is another narrative. And I think it was you that also said, and it's not about politics, it's about listening to the individual. And I heard about Daniel Barenboim say something very similar about the orchestra, you know, the East-West Divan, that they're all working together as musicians. And they, through working together, on that level, they then get to know each other as people. And then you asked Yishai the question about Hebron, and honestly, I just felt the whole atmosphere change, because obviously it is a divisive question. Even when people took answers, now everyone in this room wants to work towards a better solution, and that's very heartening. So my answer to any of you is, how do you keep politics out? It's a lovely idea, and I'm sure when you do keep politics out, everyone can get along very well, but how do you keep politics out? Just explain what happens when he comes in on a bus. It is political. I wish it wasn't. My answer to all of you is, how do we get past this, and can we get past it? Or, unfortunately, does everything become a political issue? That's what I'm really interested to hear about.
Hello, my name is Malkon Marizian. You spoke earlier, I think somebody here spoke in the panel about demonization of the enemy. And I think that demonization is a well-known tactic of war, and I think that it serves a political agenda. It has been used all over the world as a weapon of war, and it works. And I think that it is used as a political agenda very much. So I think that your work as a grassroots organization to bring people to speak to one another and to look in the eyes of each other and to see, wait a minute, we are both human, we are probably not really enemies. There's somebody with an agenda that it serves their agenda to make us enemies. And the question is, I hear in this kind of argument with my Israeli friends, I often hear the argument that we are being demonized within the Palestinian community. And my question is, how do you experience this kind of demonization, and whether you find you are able to speak out against it within your communities, or how do you feel about this subject in general?
Take one Israeli, one Palestinian to answer.
Yeah, it goes both ways. At Sulha, we have listened to people who see the other as the demon, and Palestinians who have acknowledged that they were raised to see us as the devil and as demons. And as you said, the antidote to all of this is contact, is getting people together where they can actually discover each other and break it down. Our insistence on humanizing, the opposite of demonizing is humanizing, recognizing that the other person is basically a human being and might have strong feelings and strong positions, but deep down we are brothers and sisters, and it can't work for one side if it's not going to work for the other side. And that recognition is the most humanizing aspect of what we do at Sulha.
Good evening. أنا بدي أبدأ هيك كالتالي، إن أنا قاعد في المجال اللي بشتغل فيه وهون في القدس بشتغل في مجال مع ناس في جزء منهم اللي هم أحداث متعاطي مخدرات.
I want to start as the following. In my field of work in Jerusalem, I work with people who are drug addicts.
ومع ذلك كثير جهات اليوم تشتغل مع تبعين المخدرات، بس المخدرات قاعدة بتزيد سواء عند العرب أو عند اليهود.
Many people work with drug addicts, but it's actually increasing. Addiction is increasing.
والإشي كل طرف بحمل الآخر هو المسؤول.
Whether it's for Arabs or Jews, and both are blaming the other side.
كمان نفس الإشي بالنسبة للعاملين، أنا أول إشي بعمل منذ وقت طويل وبأمل وبطمح بالسلام دائما، بس كثير جمعيات بتشتغل بالسلام وحتى يوم يجوا يناقشوا الأمور بين بعض بتكونش الأمور واضحة.
Also for those who are peace activists, when they come together and discuss things, things are not clear.
مع الاحترام يعني للشاب هو محمد.
With all respect to Muhammad who's here.
لما توجه له بالسؤال مين أنت خايف؟ الوضع السياسي والاحتلال نفسه أفرز عند الفلسطيني، لأن الشباب الفلسطينيين اللي قاعدين بالخلف كمان احتجوا إذا أنت واقف هون وأنت بدكش تقول من مين خايف بيسجنك، لا الهاجس الأمني اللي أفرز وأنتج الوضع السياسي هو خلى الفلسطيني باستمرار هو في خوف.
So he's saying how the question was phrased, was reluctant to share and answer who was he afraid from regarding what our brother here asked him. He's saying this is part of what the Palestinian psyche is made up from now. It's filled with fear.
لأن الفلسطيني إلى لما كله وممكن أي واحد من اللي هون ياخذ له صورة أو على الموقع وينشر عنده في منطقته أن هذا تطبيع وسبب له شيء آثار كبيرة إلى ولعائلته.
These Palestinians can be stigmatized, stereotyped as normalizers when they're taken with video or their pictures back to their family.
فدائما مش لازم نقارن المجموعة القوية بالمجموعة الضعيفة، احنا اليوم في وضع مش من مشاعر دونية وإنما احنا في وضع ضعف كفلسطينيين.
So we should never compare those who are weak or the victims with the oppressors because we as Palestinians are in the weak position today.
بس السؤال اللي بدي أوجهه للبانل اللي هو بدأ فيه إينون مع احترامي لإينون.
I have a question to the panel that Inon has started with.
قال يهودا وشمرون، يهودا والسامرة.
He said Judea and Samaria.
مجرد ما قال يهودا والسامرة فهو بنفي وجودي كفلسطيني.
And this actually deletes or rejects my existence as a Palestinian.
فالسؤال هون، لا أنا ما حفظت الأسماء.
So the question here to the respectable guys,
للراف والراف، ممكن إحنا نعيش في مرحاض مشتاف في إشي مساحة مشتركة. ممكن نعيش في مساحة مشتركة في فضاء مشترك.
In a common space, living together.
بس لما نصل لمعضلة.
But when we reach to an obstacle.
يعني إن مين أول في هاي البلد، أنا أو أنت.
Such as who was first here in this land, me or you.
إن هاي الحرم الإبراهيمي ولا معراتها مخبلة.
For example, this Abrahamic mosque or the other, what he mentioned, sorry.
الأقصى ولا الهيكل.
The Aqsa mosque or the temple.
صراعنا هو صراع وجود ولا صراع حدود.
So our struggle, whether it's about barriers or boundaries or existential.
هل نستطيع كناس نؤمن بالآخر وبنؤمن بالإنسانية إن نوصل هاي لأجيالنا وأول إشي لأولادنا في بيوتنا، ولا بس هاي مجرد إشي هيك إحنا بنسويه بالعلن؟
Can we transfer those values to our children, or are we just doing this in public for just public talk?
فشو هي الديليما المعضلة أو شو هي البصيرة؟ يعني شو هي التوفنا بسموها في العبلة؟
What is the dilemma and what is the insight or the solution?
إحنا في صلحة لما حكى يوقف، إحنا حكينا في الحلقة عن الظلام والنور، إحنا بنحاول نأخذ البصيرة من الظلام.
So as Yoav was explaining, we try to take the insight from darkness or light from darkness.
بالنسبة لنا هو الضوء اللي بناخذه من الظلام، وهو الظلام هو المعضلة والضوء هو البصيرة.
And thus light is like insight and darkness is the obstacle. And that's what we take from, we learn through in Sulha.
So we're going to take an answer from this side, and an answer from this side, and we're going to...
If I understand the question, it's what are we practically doing to not just come up here and have like an event and take pictures, but
فإيميل السؤال بالذات إنه إيش بالضبط بنعمل، هل نوصل هذا الإشي لأولادنا؟ هذا هو السؤال الرئيسي.
السؤال مختصر.
أيوة.
إحنا بنقدر هينا قاعدين في غرفة مشتركة وبنناقش، بس يوم نصل للإشي الحقيقي في الواقع، اللي أعطيت 3 أمثلة، أنا ولا أنت موجود هون، يهودا والسامرة ولا يهودا وشمرون.
No, that's true.
There's a conflict.
Okay.
Can we transfer it in real life?
Yes.
To our children?
First of all, I personally don't have a problem with calling Judea, Judea, Samaria, Samaria, and the combination of the two West Bank. That doesn't bother me. I don't have a problem even calling the country Palestine sometimes, or the Holy Land, or Israel, or Canaan, meaning this country has many names throughout history. And from my perspective, if I go to Canada and the border guard looks at my Israeli passport and says, you're from Palestine? Yeah, Palestine is one synonym for my country. It's one name of my country. These terms don't threaten me. I think to get caught up in saying things like, no, you can't say West Bank, you can't say Judea, you can't say Samaria, is really, it's really, in my opinion, like burning a lot of energy fighting over semantics when we should really be talking about substance. And for me, the substance is how do we live together in this land? How do we like unpack the grievances and aspirations of both sides? How to really how do we create a solution in this land that the Jews, especially the Jews who are like really deeply living Jewish history, and for the most part, let's be honest, those are the Jews living in the West Bank. How do we experience this as the rebirth of Hebrew civilization and the realization of all the things that we've wanted and tried to achieve for 2,000 years? And for Palestinians, how can this be a democratic society with full inclusion and full equality, and that we're able to move forward together? These are questions that are ongoing, meaning like this is a conversation that's ongoing. I don't think that we have to resolve everything this evening, but I think this is a direction to really try to understand on a deep level what's important to both people. And when we have peace here, we'll care about what's important to both people. For me, peace is not a ceasefire, peace is unity. My aspiration is for Jews and Palestinians to understand that it's not in either of our interests to continue this conflict. And in fact, I think that what we're both most guilty of is allowing outsiders, whether the British or others that came after them, to push us into conflict with one another when it benefits them. There are other agendas, outside agendas at play in this country, and we're both like freirin, bemet, like we're both suckers for allowing outsiders to be able to manipulate us into conflict with one another while selling everybody weapons across the Middle East.
An answer on that side of the table from a Palestinian. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. I believe we're now going to take a coffee break before the next Hebrew panel.